There's the YouTube guys. Sorry about that. We are talking about just briefly before we get started on the political stuff, just some interesting ideas for just some merchandise and some ideas I was playing around with. I found something that was really cool. I got it loaded into the stream, the YouTube stream. So give me a second. I'm going to drop it into Twitch, and you can tell me what you think here. I found this graphic that I like a lot, and it turns out that they have a bunch of them. And looking at this against colored backgrounds, I realize the text is a little thin. It still needs some work. But let me see if I can drag it into the Twitch stream here. Yeah, there we go. And on YouTube, where I am, here we go. Come on. So that's the first one, right there. I really, really like it. I really like the attitude, and like I said, this artist has a bunch of stuff. I did three of them, just a demo. Now, obviously, that text is too thin. I need to make it bigger or whatever because it's falling apart. But yeah, and I'm gonna probably have the face redone. The face is not part of the graphic. I added the face myself. It's a little harsh, but nevertheless, it's pretty cool. I think it's going to work really well. So that's the first one, to just give you a flavor of what this kind of thing is going to be able to do, because like I said, they got a bunch of these things. So I'll drag it into Twitch first here. So check this out. What happened? Why do you do that? Why do you do this to me? Hang on a second, guys. Just another bloody day with the software. Come on. I know this must be really hilarious on YouTube, so there, that's close enough. And then on YouTube, let's switch to the other one here. I hate this double stream thing. I've got to find a different solution because this is just terrible. Oh, I'm sorry. I dropped it into the wrong one. Never mind. Hang on. Here comes the next one for you Twitch watchers here. So there's that. I'll change that from a skateboard to a surfboard. I'll keep the rocket engines on there, but I'll just do a little bit. I'll lengthen it out a little bit, take the wheels out with Photoshop. But that's just kind of rad. And on this one, I might replace the Earth background with the moon. I think that probably is what I'll do. So that's cool. Taps556 says needs the flag. Well, Taps, have I got the answer for you, my lad? Because among the many other things this thing's got, it's got one of them standing on the moon with a thumbs up, which is really cool, holding the flag. But tell me what you think about this one, about our four guys stuck on the moon here. Into Twitch first. And then here. What the hell is going on here? I want that off. Oh, there we go. I want that off. I want that off. And I want that on. There. All right, finally. Yeah, this is really nasty. Working these two things at the same time. But you can see that it's just really great. And when I bring that text out, it needs, like I said, needs to be thicker. But they've actually got they've got a guy carrying a football. They've got four guys crossing the road like the Beatles, you know, on Abbey Road. They've got like astronauts with guitars in space. It's just really, really, really cool. It's just, there we go, live there, and we'll go back live here. It's just kind of irreverent and really fun. And yeah, everybody's saying, I want a mug, I want a t-shirt and stuff. We'll make all of that available. We're not going to do what we did before. we bought a gross of shirts, and then we had to worry about selling them, and then we'll find somebody who can do the what's that word? When somebody handles it online, I'm forgetting what that's called now, but nevertheless, yeah. And Stuart Clark points out that makes great tattoo graphics. So there's a bunch of them. Fulfillment is the word I'm looking for. So I just found these guys that may not be the best guys, but what I'm going to be doing, maybe I'll just figure it out, find out the best way. But ideally, what would happen would be we would just have a link, and then we could send you to the link, and then they would ship it to you, and they would deduct the cost of the T-shirt and all the rest of it, so we'd keep our few pennies. And anyway, that's the way to go with these things. So I just thought they looked really cool, and I actually, after this last show, I think after the last Stratosphere Studio, after I wrapped up the work I needed, I was just on this streak. It's like, hey man, this stuff's actually really good. So I got my Colonies T-shirt again here, see, which will be redone, but nevertheless, I've got a Big Bats Problem T-shirt coming with a picture of the big bat. I've got a really cool one against black of the Aurora ship. That should work out well. It's not here yet. And I did one more. What was it? I did the Eagle Squadron from Aurora Republic things that I did a while ago. So anyway, that's just exciting, and stuff like that is coming. The show titles, too, I'm very happy with. And I think these could be interesting potential merchandise things. Just to show you a couple of them here. Hang on. I'm just really generally happy with the graphic design work here. So these are all 1080. That's good. What do I want? Almost there. Hang on, kids. Here. Okay, so I'll just drop this into both of them, and we'll just pray. So this is the logo for. This is not giving me all kinds of trouble. This is the logo for Story Mechanics, which I really like a lot. Let me get it onto the other stream here. This is tedious. This has to go. Maybe there's a way to do. In fact, there's got to be a way for me to have a switcher and then send out two independent streams, because we were doing them simultaneously, and they were. And I think it was Twitch that was having a cow about it. So let me see. Story Mechanics. We'll bring this over here. There you go. Oh, come on. Try it again. Come in. Let it go. Let it. Oh, I hate you. I hate you with with every fiber in my body. All right, there. I think that looks really cool, and I also am going to be doing Things to Come as a series. I've already blocked out a bunch of them. Let's see if I have the thumbnail for that, and I think. Where did I put it? Yeah. So this looks pretty cool as well here. Stop! Oh god damn this thing. Sorry, it just never ends. It never ends. I am so tired of this. Hang on. There. That's Things to Come for you, and then Things to Come over here. Yeah, that worked out okay. So anyway, I think they're all really cool, and the new logo is basically, this is fantastic signature. I just love it. Hang on. You obviously can tell I've just completely lost my mind here with this thing. You? Yes. I'll see how well this holds up. Yep. Okay, so let's turn that guy off. And that guy off. No, I have no idea what it's. Oh, okay, here we go. You turn you on, you turn you off, and you off, and you on, and this is just madness. Nope. Nope. Well, oh, there it is. Hey, look at that. Now I'll do it on the other one, which is a lot more friendly for some reason. Hang on, and we'll just do that. And we'll turn off the backgrounds here. Ba-boom, ba-boom. There you go. I just think that looks really great. I downloaded so many fonts, but I mean, I downloaded like 40 or 50. But I really, 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 really like this. I love the B, and I just think it's fantastic. So I'm going to be going with that as a general rule. And we're still working on the back end. But other than that, things are, rolling along. They're taking longer than I thought they would, but we've come to realize now that that's a Bill problem. And I guess it always will be. You'd think I'd learned by now. Because when somebody says, yeah, I'll have it for you in 4 days, I just assume that means 4 days, but in any event. Anyway, that's a nice comment. Eric Blake says that signature logo invokes Walt Disney's signature. That'd be fantastic. Can I animate it so it looks like it's getting written on the screen? I don't think so, Dave Big Booty, because the letters, it would be an awful lot of work. However, we got a good look at a idea for story mechanics graphics, and I love the guy working on the clock for Metropolis so much. Well, thank you, Daniel. Daniel Good. Haven't seen me since 2015. Good to see you still active. Been active the whole time. You can thank YouTube or Twitch and all the rest of it for that. What the heck was I just saying? Gosh, I'm just really scattered today. Oh well. I just completely lost it. Anyway, let's get on with the show here. So tonight is political night, and I don't really Metropolis. Thank you. So for script story mechanics, I'm going to do a real fast, like a 5-second, super fast cut of the guy working the hands of the arrows, and then the other guy's doing the levers, and the machine, and it's just going to be like, and then story mechanics is going to fly in, and I'm really liking that guy, the guy who's moving the hands of the clock. It's just really great. So yeah, so that's that. Okay, yeah, and I love. Well, thank you, Mel. I love. Using Metropolis because Metropolis is such a tremendously good look at the horrors of the past age, of the industrial era. That movie is all about turning people into machines, and I really like the fact that we are one major human revolution ahead of that. I like using the graphics from the last one. So we're using industrial graphics to sell information products. I think it's fantastic. Odeu CP Tomes. That would be marvelous. Can you remind me about that when we close up, or send an email to info@billwhittle.com if you can let me borrow it, because it's hard to find a really good quality of it, and you need a really good quality of it. It's a fantastic movie. It's visually striking anyway. Acting has improved a bit since then. But in any event, that's that. So since I don't have anything really prepared to talk about other than some of the progress and all the rest of these things that are all moving at the same time, what I think we'll do is we'll just jump into the questions here. So let's do that. Now, I am just dying here as this delay on this website just grinds on. But we will see. So come on, where are you? All right. I do know that I did talk about with the web designer. One thing I'm just committed to speed. She doesn't think that we should keep the archives on a separate island. I do, because it's slowing things down. But in any event, I've looked into dedicated server hosting at A2, which is known for their really fast servers. Because after all the delays and all of the expectations, I really want I want it to be just really like a shockingly new experience. So let's see what we got here. It looks like the forum's still up. Temporary location. So I don't know what happened to the other ones. It's tough when you're dealing with somebody who's on the other side of the planet in Indonesia. I mean, I'm very happy with the work, but our schedules are perfectly out of phase. 12 hours out of phase, and it's tough for me to ask real-time questions on these things. Anyway, we'll figure it all out. Just so you know, this is not so much a style question as it is a statement question. I mentioned this on the Stratosphere Studio, and people seem to be okay with that. What I'm strongly thinking about doing is essentially, there's so much patchwork code on that old site. There's just so much stacked band-aids and and just spaghetti code, and it's just kind of nuts. So what I'm thinking about doing, what I talked about on Monday, and people seem to think it was a good idea, is to basically take everything that's on the existing website and get a new domain for it, and call it BillWhittleArchives.com. And then you can go back and see anything that you want to find will still be there. The people that I mentioned this to last time said, hey, it's not a problem going slow if you're looking for older stuff. I really want a fresh piece of paper for this, because we're starting all these new shows and everything, and I just want it to just go. So we'll see. Time for the spectacles again. Somebody had a question here, so I don't know if it's one in the things, but there is something here I do want to talk about. First of all, another fantastic super chat from Sad Wings Raging for $50. Thanks. Relax, Bill. We got you. Just remember what happened to Parler when choosing a server. Yeah. That's an interesting point. I've heard that A2 was really good. We've got there's no way I'm going on Amazon. I think it's called A2 Hosting. They're known for their high speed, and they have really, really reasonable dedicated servers. And so if we get a dedicated server on A2, this thing, and especially if we cut loose the existing stuff and make it available as archives under a different web domain name, then I think this thing's going to be blindingly fast. Now, I did open up this temporary questions thing, and I said I was going to go right to the questions, but somebody put something in the comments here, Benjamin Good, that I actually do want to talk about. And the question was, what are your thoughts on the new speaker? I couldn't believe I couldn't believe that he was actually saying what he was saying. I mean, I really couldn't believe it. It seemed incredible to me that somebody might get up there and basically talk about our foundational, morality, and he's, he thinks that God put him there and the rest of the members of Congress there in order to get this country straightened out. And I think he had a line that was almost verbatim, like, we're here to do the business of the American people and do it effectively because they deserve it. So I'm sure the left is losing their minds over the fact that he mentioned God and all the rest of this stuff. Undoubtedly, the handmaiden's tale is already kicked into place, and the concentration camps are being built as we speak. But what did impress me about it was that this guy had the spotlight of the world on him, and he was not ashamed or embarrassed to say what he thought was important, which I thought was radical. radical. Caught my breath the same way that listening to Rush Limbaugh used to do that sometimes. I can't, did he actually say that? Yes. He said it because it's true. I said, oh, I remember now. I remember that truth thing, vaguely. So, yeah. So, I think, AOC said he's the lead architect of January 6th. Well, then he has my undiluted support. So anyway, I just thought that was really, really, really powerful and courageous. That's the thing I think impressed me the most about it was I thought it was courageous to come out and say those things in knowing the kind of blowback he was going to get. We have desecularized our society to the point, or is it secularized? I never get that right. To the point where if you mention religion or God, certainly any Christian religion, anywhere in government, the hounds will come swooping down on you, and that's because people with a strong moral code are much more difficult to manipulate and to buy, and they don't want that. So I think the fact that he came out and just basically went right at it and said, look, he didn't even say, I believe. He said, we're here as God put us here. I'll put us all here at the same time to get this stuff straightened out. And I thought, my God, that took real commitment, not just guts, but, character and actual fundamental belief. I don't imagine somebody, can always be negatively surprised. I'll never get over how low the bottom can get. But I do find that that it doesn't make much sense for somebody to take to state such an opinion that's going to draw so much fire if you didn't really believe in it. That's what I think is most impressive about that. And when I saw the comments with his announcement, I saw just again and again, maybe this is the beginning, maybe this is the hope, maybe this is the turnaround, maybe this is the turning point. So, I've seen what the progressives have done with government, and I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with their education system. I'm not impressed with the way they govern cities. I'm not impressed with their financial policies. I'm not impressed with their defense policies. I'm not impressed with any of it. So we will see what we will see. But in any event, that's there. By the way, I showed just a moment ago the things to come image, which is basically of a guy in a suit looking at the wreckage of a burning city. And I know that is extraordinarily depressing. But actually, things to come for me is just actually really quite positive. I guess I do have something political to talk about after all, before I get to the questions, and I will get to the questions. So just so you know, I'm going to run with these things like, what would be the best example? I guess more like the virtual presidency or something, because I think they're all going to be tied together with this theme. So I'm just going to do, like, episode 1 will be, the theory. Here's the 80-year cycle theory. And then I'm just going to do individual commentary on things like, here's how the language is getting stupider. Here's who I think our next soldiers are out to be. I've got an episode called Traitors, which I have to fully develop, but it occurred to me when I saw footage taken by citizens of cops who are way stepping over the limit. They're being far too tyrannical. And I think this is going to be an infinite information conflict. I think it's going to be all about a story, all about changing minds as much as we can, and then, dealing with the people who are breaking the law. If you're not breaking the law, you got nothing to worry about. But I actually consider bad cops to be traitors in that sense. They make the fight much, much, much more difficult by giving them ammunition and I've forgotten who told me this, but somebody once said Ronald Reagan didn't come down here in order to protect us from liberals. He came down here to protect us from Republicans. And I thought, wow, that's actually really kind of interesting. So one of the things to come thing will be on language, and I'll just I'll just, look at a couple questions and I'll answer them with as many emoticons as I can. And everything is getting reduced, and the fewer words you have, the lower the granularity of your thought. The more sophisticated your language is, the more different words you have for different shades of a thing, the more you can communicate. Because there's a difference between sky and heaven, and there's a difference between worry and angst, for example. So anyway, and I'm sorry to miss that. Ben Adams with $10 Super Chat. Hi from Florida. Hi, Ben. Where in Florida, if you don't mind asking? Because I lived there for 25 years, I reckon. Lived in Miami on Key Biscayne. Went to Coral Gables High School, then went to University of Florida for several years, and then Fort Lauderdale, then out to LA, then back to UF, and then back out here again. So, Florida is just looking better and better, and there are parts of LA that are looking worse and worse. So, we will see. I will go when I have to go. Right now, it's just not something I have to do, and I have a lot of things that I do have to do. So that's that. Oh, by the way, Johnny Voigt said he'd be back end of October, so I'm going to get in touch with him next week, early November anyway, and we should be able to start the story mechanics thing. And I'll go into more detail on that on Monday. Anyway, that business about the Speaker of the House was really, I thought, very powerful and a really encouraging sign. Plant City, I know where that is, I think. Is that kind of in the area between like Okeechobee and Orlando, in that general vicinity? Is that where it is? Kind of like where Lakeland is? Clay says, hey, Clay, how are you, man? You don't need to leave California. You just need to leave L.A. Well, so far, L.A. hasn't touched us in our little secluded, absolutely perfect small town little suburb. We go for walks at 2 a.m, quiet neighborhood, and anybody suspicious, gets questioned. And I live in Mayberry, which just happens to be in the San Fernando Valley. And if that starts near Lakeland, I thought so. It's good to see you, Ben. There's a town in that general vicinity called Yahoo Junction. And then there's another one that I remember seeing on the turnpike because we used to laugh at it all the time. And it was called Zurich or something. It was like ZZARK. Something. Maybe there were no vowels in it at all. But I remember Yahoo Junction, not Yahoo Junction. I remember seeing that and thinking, Yahoo, what a fun place to be. That would be. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to the questions here. See what we got. Once again, the spectacles. Hope you have a sidearm on our walks. I don't. I don't feel like I need a sidearm on my walks in this neighborhood. That's how solid the neighborhood is, and how kind of tightly woven it is. We have our 4th of July parade, and it's not even really a parade. It's like everybody in this. It's just a little tiny square, bounded by these streets that I'm not going to name, but it's just this little tiny little square. It's probably 6-7 blocks by 5 or 6 blocks, and on the 4th of July, everybody just gets together at one of the corners of this area, and everybody comes out, and we just walk through the neighborhood, just waving flags. So it's really, really, really cool, and plus air conditioned outside, so that's a benefit. All right, so let's see. Marusha Dark, topic Pacific Rim, date October 26, 2023. Mr. Virtual Secretary of Defense. I love it. I've been watching a number of videos on global history and the strategic significance of places like Taiwan, Ukraine, Turkey, Korea, Iran, etc. It's really pushed my libertarian sensibilities around foreign policy. Case in point, here's one on China and how they and the U.S. are both preparing for a conflict over Taiwan, and there's a link. I've got the basics of it. With all due respect, while I still think we could beat them in the end, if it came to it, I don't think they'll be as much of a paper tiger as you might hope. A hot war would be brutal and bloody and possibly even nuclear. Having said that, Do you think we should be considering an Indo-Pacific alliance akin to NATO to deal with threats on that hemisphere? Such a coalition would necessarily include countries like US, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, India, and Taiwan. Further, when the Republic of China was first formed, the US recognized them as the legitimate authority in China. It wasn't until 1979 that we formally switched to recognize the CCP in an effort to undermine the Soviets. Should we now reverse that decision and even go so far as to place China's seat on the UN Security Council with Taiwan? Okay, so a lot about Taiwan. Best thing I ever heard about this, in terms of my overall emotional opinion, is somebody once described that enormity of mainland China as West Taiwan. And I thought, yeah. One of the things that is most striking about America's Forgotten Heroes episode about Jimmy Doolittle is how much the Chinese people suffered in order to protect the Americans who launched that raid on the Japanese. If you're not up on your world history there, World War II actually started in a couple of other places, but you can make a compelling case that it started with the Japanese invasion of China, which went on for years. I want to say 5, 6, 7 years, something. And the rape of Nanking and the destruction of all these things, and just having contests to see how many heads you could chop off with samurai swords. So the Japanese were absolutely brutal in China, and when the Doolittle raid occurred, all of the planes, with one exception, which went to Vladivostok, they all ended up landing either in mainland China or ditching on the coast, and all of the crews except for really 2 of them pretty much got out within the first couple weeks. The other 2 crews did not, and that's a story in itself. So if you're interested in this, and you should be, because it's an amazing story. It's America's Forgotten Heroes on your favorite podcast, I think. So, oh God, I'm gonna have to just commit to wearing these things. Sorry. UberMe163 says not the same Chinese. Yes, this was what I was thinking about. I was thinking, how could those? When I say they suffered for us, there's an estimate that is pretty reliable that the Japanese executed 250,000 Chinese in the search for and in retribution for them helping the Americans. That's damn near half of our killed during World War II, and that is not something that should be forgotten. And so okay. Oh my God. Miles says, my dad instructed many B-25 pilots. A great airplane. But UberMe said it's not the same Chinese, and it's not. And I think clearly, I remember when I was writing the episode, how could these Chinese, you can't read about what they did, the risks they took and the price they paid to help these American pilots just get home. It's a catastrophe. It's hundreds of thousands of people killed in order to get these 80 guys back home. And I remember writing it thinking, how can these be the same people that are in China now? And I realized they're not the same people that are in China now. They're the people that are in Taiwan now. They basically just went to Taiwan. And Mao's doing his, communist revolution while the war's going on. After the war, he manages to pull it off. And the nationalist forces under Chiang Kai-shek went to Formosa, which became Taiwan. So we owe the people of Taiwan, and they had been our allies in World War II and done us a great service and paid a high price for it. But it's different than that as well. You're talking about a free country there in Taiwan, and you're talking about, once again, this communist aggression, this idea that the West is so rapacious. It's like, no, the West didn't start Korean War. The communists did. We didn't start the Vietnamese War. The communists did. We didn't start the stuff down in Central America. The communists did. They did all of this stuff. They just can't stop. It's a matter of pride, obviously, for the CCP. I should rephrase that, actually. It's a matter of face for the CCP. It is enormously embarrassing to them that there is another entire nation of Chinese people that fought against the communists and is not only succeeding but thriving and by any measure outperforming China on a per capita basis by order of magnitude or something. So, you know, you said a conflict with China would be incredibly bloody. I'm not entirely sure about that. I certainly don't think and I am completely against, 100% against, boots on the ground in either Taiwan or Ukraine. 100% against that, and I always have been. But China has got a big problem, and when the Russians invaded Ukraine, they had to cross an imaginary line on the ground. For China to get to Taiwan, that's a whole nother story. I don't know that they have the sea lift capacity to do it, even if nobody shoots back. Taiwan has been, on the other hand, just amassing weapons. And one thing we have seen from Ukraine is that prior to the war in Ukraine, the general opinion was, if you've got a whole bunch of tanks someplace, you're going to be unbeatable. And turns out, nope. There's been a revolution in military affairs. The tank is I think it's obsolete. It's certainly not the tip of the spear that it used to be. So if China is planning to get, I don't see how China can sea lift enough men to fight the men that would be waiting for them in Taiwan, who have excellent weapons and a high degree of morale. That's if the U.S. doesn't even get involved. But I think we ought to make it clear, that Taiwan is a separate country. It is an ally of the United States, and I think we ought to do what John Kennedy did, which is essentially, basically say, any attack from Cuba onto the United States will be considered a direct attack by the Soviet Union upon the United States. Made it nice and clear. Clarity is important if you want to avoid wars and conflicts. Now, if it turned out that the U.S. got involved with this, then there's not a single chance that China could ever get their stuff across the Straits of Taiwan. Just not a chance at all, none. They have some submarines. Interestingly enough, this is where our attack subs become important. We have the boomers for strategic deterrence, but if China decided to launch that invasion, we would have as many attack subs as we could possibly get there. And you can't just launch that kind of invasion by surprise. If you're going into Taiwan all the way in, there's going to be many, many months of buildup, so it's not like we're going to be surprised. And I would put every sub I had in there. And if a hot war was declared, first thing we'd do is we'd take out the Chinese attack boats, and then we take out everything that they've got. And I would keep the carriers out of range of any land-based missiles, and I'd basically use the U.S. Navy naval aviation to go clean up whatever debris manages to survive submarine attack, plus cruise missile attack, plus precision-guided weapons attack, all that stuff. It is a monumental task. Can somebody tell me real quick in the comment section, because I don't want to spend time looking it up. Somebody tell me what the shortest point between Taiwan and China is. What's the shortest point? Because last Chinese fought against Vietnam in '79 and arguably lost. They did arguably lose. I remember seeing like a brackets, like a March Madness kind of basketball brackets, and it got down to the final four were Afghanistan, United States, Russia, and Vietnam, and Afghanistan and Vietnam played it out in the finals. 40 miles? I thought it was a little further than that, 70 miles. Okay, 70, 80 miles. So figure that is probably 3 times the distance, at least 2 times the distance of the D-Day invasion. And as far as I know, I don't think we lost a single unit during the crossing. I do know that there was a practice run for D-Day that cost 800 people's lives. That was kind of a shock. But yeah, 100 miles of water, and Taiwan is going to be waiting for them. And it's much easier to move a javelin than it is to move a tank. And I just plain don't see it. And it really comes down to spirit. That's the one thing we're learning about, the Ukraine war is, if people are determined to defend their homeland, then the defender has a tremendous advantage. But and I don't see how you overcome that, frankly. Getting across 100 miles of open ocean without the U.S. Navy is in itself a logistics problem that I don't think China is anywhere near able to solve. With the United States involved, then it's just pointless. It's pointless. Steve Whip says the Chinese Navy is mostly 90% brown water Navy, littoral Navy, close to shore. You don't get too far out of brown water if you're going 100 miles to Taiwan, but they don't have any kind of power projection, any kind of force projection. I'd keep the carriers out of range of surprises. Plus, we have what they simply do not have, and are showing no signs of even starting to build, and that is massive airstrike capability due to air-to-air refueling, which we've taken to an absolute art, and is just absolutely routine now. I mean, I can do it. The Drogan and probe thing, it's hard, but I can do it. And we just don't realize just how powerful we are relative to the rest of the world, which is why I get pissed off by this subject, because we're always shaking in our boots about what they're going to do to us, and it's like, why don't we think about what we're going to do to them? That's what they should be thinking about. They should be thinking about what we're going to do to them. Got a super chat here from Caledon. This is pointless. Caledon Stockley. Crimson Tide, U-571, Hunt for Red October, The Enemy Below, and Das Boot ranked in order, please. Das Boot, Crimson Tide, Hunt for Red October, Enemy Below, and U-571. Battle Smurf says there's only 2 months out of the year where the straits are crossable. We've been putting $600 billion a year into this machine for 40 years, something like that. I'm not at all worried about. Now, let me play the other side of the coin here. I'm not at all worried about our military ability to prevent this. Not in the slightest. I have deep concerns about whether the political leadership would make the stand or not, and I also have deep concerns not with the hardware but with the personnel. I think that this idea, there's no way to explain it other than treason. There's no way to explain why, if all 4 of your branches of the armed services are dramatically underperforming when it comes to recruiting, there's no possible explanation for why you would try to recruit the people who are not only the least likely to sign up, but the most trouble if they do. When you start doing woke advertising for military services is a contradiction in terms. It's certainly a contradiction in concepts. You're not going to get woke people with woke advertising, and if the little handful, little scattering you are going to get are going to be a real problem for you. They're going to take 5 or 6 patriots to just manage these people. There's no other explanation for it other than it's intentional treason. There's no other explanation for it. And so what and the reason I say that it's intentional is because since de facto evidence, prima facie evidence says that using woke techniques to bring people in the military is not only not effective, but it's catastrophic. You have to ask yourself why they do it. And Sadwings beat it to me. He said, Southerners have quit joining the military. Yes. The actual purpose of woke Army advertising, for example, is, Rachel Levine and all of this, the rationale is in my opinion, is that they do this stuff not to attract woke people to the armed forces because they know that's not going to work. It's to make the armed forces untenable to people who are interested in joining the armed forces for the reasons that people used to join the armed forces. They're patriots. They like a little action. They're mostly young men. They want to see the world and kill people, and they've got family history of military service. During our backstage show, which is available for members only, we talked about. I was wearing a fleece that I got when I was aboard the USS Spruance. I want to say 4 or 5 years ago. And Steve Green really knows his naval history. So we started talking about. He said, "Compliments on your shirt." I said, "Thank you." So we started talking about World War II admirals, and he went into Admiral King, who was by all accounts the nastiest man who ever lived, but managed to fight a navy in 2 oceans on opposite sides of the world. So he got the job done. We talked about Nimitz and Halsey and Spruance and the difference in their character and so on. And then he told me that the new chief of naval operations is named, I think, Franchetti. I think that's the name. Admiral Franchetti is a woman who's got a degree in journalism. And I find this extremely alarming. There's a Gilbert and Sullivan song. I don't know if I can't remember if it's HMS Pinafore or Pirates of Penzance, but it's called, is it the Captain of the King's Navy? There's something about the King's Navy, and basically the whole song is about how you become First Lord of the Admiralty. And in the song, the first thing the guy does is he's a clerk, but he manages to polish up the handles on the big brown doors, so they bump him up to, he's a janitor, so they bump him up to clerk. And he had really, really nice handwriting, so they bump him up to this. Then he gets more and more, he becomes a partner at the law firm, and it's Pinafore, and then he becomes, a major military guy, and then he becomes the first Sea Lord. He's in charge of the Royal Navy, the most powerful force in the world by far when it was written. And that whole song is about absolute incompetence taking you all the way to the top. And the end line is, so if you, he basically says, if you want to be the ruler of the King's Navy, then the worst thing you can do is go to sea. Don't go to sea if you want to run the Navy. And I, that's it, yeah. When I was a lad, I served a term as office boy in an attorney's firm. I always voted my country's call, and I never thought of thinking for myself at all. And he never did. Love Gilbert and Sullivan. So it's just the story of promoting incompetence. Now, I'm not saying that Franchetti is incompetent. I'm just saying she doesn't strike me. You can look her up. Just look at Chief of Naval Operations. She doesn't strike me as the single most capable officer in the United States Navy in terms of her resume. And the fact that her degree is in journalism instead of nuclear engineering or aerospace or weapon systems or even electronics engineering, any of those things. Nope, journalism. That's telling you something. And what it's telling me is that this is a political appointee who's there in order to get the war fighters out of the Navy. This is how China beats the United States Navy. It's not by outfighting us. They have no chance to outfight us. They have a chance to corrupt us from within. And like I said, if you've got the most powerful sword in the world, magic sword, in fact, doesn't do you any good if you're not strong enough to lift it. So they're not going after the sword. They're going after the arm of the sword. And isn't the chief of staff of the Army, isn't that a woman as well? And listen, obviously I have my opinions about this. There is no question that women do an extraordinary job in the military, and a great deal of work is done by women in the military. But if you're talking about the pool of recruits, you're talking about probably 5 to 6%, I would say. And so when you end up with a woman that's the chief of the Army, chief of staff of the Army, and then the chief of naval operations, and they're both women who have limited experience with combat, that's a message. And the message is Those of you that want to go out there and shoot things and and blow things up and fire torpedoes at things and bomb targets and all the things that make life worth living, you are not welcome here. This is not a fighting unit anymore. This is just more of what you got at home, and that will over time really weaken the armed forces. I believe the cycle's going to turn before that happens. I think we built something that's so strong. The Constitution will survive this next the crisis of the fourth turning, and so will the American Republic. As I said before, it'll just come out, be made of the different parts, but it'll be the same design. So, related to this, there's a video out there, and it's just one of these man on the street things. And I understand that these things are selectively edited. I get it. But basically, this person, woman or man, I don't remember, goes up to all of these young social justice women and say, who do you think's more important to society, men or women? And it's like women, back and forth, all of them. All these women are saying women are the most important part to society. And then the guy starts saying, okay, well, 96% of the construction and 99% of the plumbing and 94% of this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And they kind of start looking like, oh, what? They can say that because we live in a time where strength is irrelevant and courage is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. This is coming off of an unbelievable leap in prosperity and security. We've managed to plug the holes of invasion of the United States, and we've been so secure for so long. Our military's done such an extraordinary job that we now have nothing to worry about, and so we don't assume that there's any threats anywhere. What was the thing that I saw about this? I guess we were just talking about gullibility. It was an interesting episode. I think it was Scott's episode, where he was talking about a woman who'd been held hostage by Hamas recently, released by Hamas, thanked the guy in Hamas on television, and then got out of her chair, walked out of the studio, and then a moment later came back and thanked him again and wished him shalom. And my reply to that was, well, I don't know how I would behave if somebody was holding my wife hostage, so let's factor that in. But if it turns out that she was really serious and not trying to do whatever she could to get her husband out of there, if it turns out she really thinks that you can walk up to one of these animals and say shalom and we can all find a way to work it out, what is it going to take? How many people are going to have to die before you realize that your theory about people is wrong? It's wrong. It's naive, and it's not virtuous. It's a virtuous thing to seek peace. It's a virtuous thing to work for peace, but it is not a virtuous thing to ignore reality. That is actually a form of narcissism, and this is what the left revels in, is the narcissism of it. And you can see this on display right now. It's like when you hear these pro-Palestinian protests, it's like, well, Israel is strong, so Israel is the oppressor. Israel must be morally wrong. The United States supported Israel, so we're really behind the problem with the poor Palestinians. And there's this automatic equation between the underdog being morally correct. And it's just false on its face. The Israelis could have pushed the Gaza Strip into the ocean at any time during the last 30 years. And they didn't. So my point is, there comes a time when you have to face the fact that your opinion about somebody is wishful thinking and may in fact be magical thinking. You want to believe it so much you think that you can believe it into existence. That's the difference between wishful thinking, which is kind of hoping for something, and magical thinking, which is the idea that if you believe in something strongly enough, it's going to happen. If that Hamas terror invasion didn't do it, then I don't imagine anything will. But it's time to stop giving those people a microphone, because bodies tell the tale. I wish I didn't have to put it so brutally, but that's basically it. Bodies tell the tale. And not only the bodies, but what was done to the bodies and all of it. I am now in a perpetual mental loop in my head. It's going to sound flippant. I don't mean it to sound demeaning, but honestly, I do think about this. I am genuinely constantly calculating which of the following two agencies are doing more harm to their own cause. Is it Hamas or is it Stop Oil? Because both of them are doing everything in their power to make sure that every single person in the world hates them with a burning passion. And when I run into something that is that obvious and so obviously destructive for the cause you claim to be fighting, and I always have to look for some kind of ulterior motive. What could that possibly be? I know the people that are sitting in front of buses are idiots who fully believe that the Earth's about to die if we don't stop oil. I understand that they're just dumb. But even if you were to believe this business of the Earth, in fact, on the contrary, if you genuinely believe that the Earth's going to die in 5 years, if we don't do something right this second, then you would want to do everything you could to get people on your side, not everything you could do to piss them off to the point where they want to run you over. Yeah, CP Tome says it's not about oil. Of course it's not about oil. Of course it's not about oil. It's about control. It's about the reestablishment of two classes. It's about the destruction of the middle class. I think this is something I'm going to come to again and again and again in things to come. The middle class is what prevents tyranny, and the tyrant gene has not left the human genome. It's still in there. And so in order to get control over people, the middle class has to be eliminated, because the middle class doesn't need the rich. Middle class people don't need rich people. And most middle class people I know, in fact, virtually every middle class person I know, myself included, do not need to live a rich person's lifestyle. We're perfectly happy in our little houses, and we go out and, we do the things we do. We don't need to have 5 different jets. Sometimes it'd be nice if you had a jet, but you know what I mean? We don't sit there pining away, most of us. If you've got your own nice house in America, most people don't spend their time just dreaming about how they could have this mansion. They may want a larger house because their family's growing or something, but no. So they're deciding, the elites have decided that the middle class has to go. And what I saw come out of the pandemic, and I think this is really important. Prior to the pandemic, big government and big business were at loggerheads with each other, and on some level, it was a balance of power kind of thing, checks and balances. Big government is always trying to bring down big business by adding regulations, adding taxes, adding time, all of it, making life difficult for big business. Big business, on the other hand, wants to be able to do whatever they want to without any legal consequences and so on. And these two things were going against each other. So if a drug company wanted to develop a new drug, big government would say, well, it's going to take 20 years and $7 billion for you to jump through all of these little regulatory hoops that we're going to put in your way. But in the middle of the pandemic, I suddenly realized that somebody somewhere this is being a little bit fanciful, but not too much, somebody somewhere must have sat down and said, wait a minute, hold on now. Just imagine a meeting room with big government on one side of the table and big business on the other side, and somebody says, okay, so big business, what do you want to do? Well, we want to make as much money as we can by selling as many drugs as we can. Okay. Big business, what do you want to do? We want to control people's lives, and we tell them what to do. Okay, well, you guys have been fighting each other forever, but what if I were to tell you it was possible, big business? What if I told you that it's possible that big government is not only going to not stand in your way, big government is going to require people to buy your product, require it by law, and they will inject it into people if they don't comply. What do you think about that? Big business says, well, I think we'd make a ton of money, sell a lot of vaccines. Right. So now what does big government get out of this? They get the entire population taking a knee to government power. In not only ignorant of the facts, but in the face of the actual facts, the actual death rates, the actual actuarial tables, all of it, So somewhere along the line, these two sort of sets of elites, the money-hungry people and the power-hungry people, who've been at war with each other for the benefit of the middle class. I mean, we benefit from these guys not being able to, trump each other, if you'll pardon the expression. And somewhere along the line, they all just decided, no, we should all be working together. Big government and big business should be working together to do what we both want, which is we want our way, and we want our way all the time. And we want to be important, and we want to show people how much more important we are than them. That's why I have 6 Gulf Streams, or that's why I am the esteemed senator from the great state of, California. So it's clear now, and the good news is it's clear not just to Americans, it's clear all around the world. Actually, you could make a strong case that the Europeans were going through this much earlier than we were, and it just wasn't quite as dramatic. But along comes this pandemic, which, by the way, I might point out, I am going to go there again because this is an important thing to understand. Do you know what my first actual serious thought was about the pandemic? I'm not making this up. When I started to look at the actual effects, not the predictions, not the computer forecast, who was dying, how were they dying, what numbers of people were dying, and what did the age group correlation look like? I said to myself, wow, this pandemic is pretty much perfectly calibrated, isn't it? It's perfectly calibrated. It's deadly enough for everybody to panic, but it's not so deadly that it kills everybody. If it were yellow fever and you wipe out 1/3 of the population, then there's no society left. It'd take you 50, 70 years to recover from that. But this thing was just deadly enough to scare the living daylights out of people, and not deadly enough to cause any significant economic or political damage to the U.S., China, or any country in the world. And I remember thinking, that's convenient, That's actually convenient. That thing is just in that right sweet spot for them. I suspect they must have known, because I don't believe they took their own vaccines. I suspect that they knew as well as anybody what actually would work against this thing, which are, I always get these wrong and I don't want to get them wrong. Is it ivermectin? There are non-vaccine treatments that take COVID-19 from being a potential killer down to bad 3 days of cold. And everybody knows it. And anybody who spoke out about those things were shut down, including the President of the United States. And so, yeah, so they're drinking, oh yeah, President Trump told you to drink aquarium cleaner or horse vaccination stuff. It's just clear. So when we were in April of 2020, we were 2-3 weeks into the lockdown, and I'm looking at this doctor in New York, who's talking about hydroxychloroquine plus zinc plus an antibody. And he said, here's how it works. The hydroxychloroquine essentially opens the cell wall. That allows the zinc, which will kill viruses in the bloodstream but can't get into the cell. Hydroxychloroquine allows the zinc to get inside the infected cell, kill the virus inside the cell, and I'm going to throw in some antibiotics because your immune system is suppressed, and this is just to guard against opportunistic infections. And he said he's treated 600 patients, and 3 of them have died, and the 3 of them that died specifically did what he told them not to do. Well, that guy is dead now. I don't remember when it happened, but I do remember watching a documentary on this whole process, and he was listed as the late so-and-so. I mean, he did, Dr. Zelenka, yeah. He didn't look like he was in Olympic athlete condition, but he didn't strike me as being on death's door either, so I don't know about that, but I do know that that the thing was awful convenient, and suspiciously so. So anyway, I know this is all coming off of the Republic of China thing, but what the pandemic ultimately did was it allowed mail-in voting. I actually think that was probably the single great objective of it. He died of cancer. Well, that's compelling. It's fairly compelling that he wasn't actually bumped off. If he'd been in an accident, okay, well, people die of cancer, so that's fine. That's I'm perfectly happy to move to where the truth is in the face of new evidence. So if he's had cancer for a while and he died from it, that's a perfectly legitimate explanation. You don't need any kind of, conspiracy on top of that. I would like a statistical look, however, at the number of people that have just suddenly died, but in any event. So anyway, that's that. The main thing with it was to make sure the economy was so screwed up that Donald Trump wouldn't get elected. And I completely retract the business about him being suspicious. If he had cancer for a long time, that's the explanation. The main thing was to get people to take a knee, and I think get them used to the idea that when the government says you need to inject something into your arm, you do it without question, because there's a guy in a white lab coat on television saying it's perfectly safe. And that is the same kind of naivete as the woman who's saying shalom to Hamas, So somebody's talking about carrier stuff that always gets my attention. I can't do that. Anyway, that's what I've got with that. Long way around, but it always is. Wow, Chris Taylor, this is a lot to read. Okay, I can read this faster if I don't say it out loud, because it's a big one. Hang on a minute. Just talk amongst yourselves here. It's typically brilliant for Chris. Sorry about this delay. If I understand it correctly, what Chris is saying is that there have been historically hotspots in the world that are key control points for industry, commerce, trade, military power, all the rest of it. He's saying that in those areas you see large concentrations of intelligence assets, large concentrations of strange people who weren't there before, lots and lots and lots of spying elements, lots and lots of things, because that's where the focus is. That's what's basically coming out. And he's saying now that we're seeing a significant increase in that kind of person here in America, meaning that we have become the global point of interest in terms of this coming conflict, which makes perfect sense to me. This is not going to be a military conflict. It's not, because we plugged that last hole. We plugged it very effectively. I'm not saying they wouldn't do it militarily, but they can't. Same reason why they can't go into everybody's house and take people out and shoot them. It's because we have guns and we can shoot back. So that's off the table for them, and they're not so stupid as to lose that way. So they're thinking of some other way. In the case of guns, it's like, no, we won't just kick down your doors because we'll lose. I mean, if they tried to kick down every door in America, you'd run out of stormtroopers a long time before you run out of doors to kick. So it's just not going to happen, because we're armed. It's a deterrent. It's not magic. There's nothing mystical about it. It makes perfect sense. We're armed, so they can't do to us what the Nazis did to the Germans and the Jews, and what the communists did to the Russians, and the communists did to the Chinese. They can't do it. So they got to come at it some other way. One way they can do it is to have a world where you are perfectly able to keep your guns, but by the time we're done with your children or your grandchildren, they will turn your guns in voluntarily in exchange for a social credit cookie. That's a way that they could go around this thing. So anyway, he is basically saying that this nexus point of conflict, which has almost always been in the Middle East. The Middle East has been where, for thousands of years, geographically, the Middle East is kind of in the middle of the East. It's where Asiatic forces from the East, European and Western forces from the West, Russian forces from the North, African forces from the South. It's essentially where the world's center of gravity is when it comes to conflict. And Chris's point is that we traditionally expect to see, logically enough, that's where the largest number of intelligence assets are, because that's where the most likely trouble is going to come from. He's saying now that a lot of things like migration through the southern border and so on is telling him that we're seeing that kind of concentration of intelligence assets here inside of the United States. And I don't doubt that for a second. I don't have the evidence, but I don't doubt it. So that fact lives in the gray area until I find some decent evidence one way or another. But I've said, and I'm going to develop this things to come thing. I've said that I don't think that this coming crisis, this 80-year crisis, is going to be a military crisis. It's going to be a battle between the lawless and the law-abiding. And it's going to take place on a number of different fronts. It's going to take place on inner cities. It's going to take place with all of the southern border refugees who are now deep inside America. And it's going to take place with an entire generation of children that have been told that authority is automatically evil Nazis, and it's your moral obligation to refuse to cooperate with them under any circumstances. I'm not going to go all the way into the body cam thing again, but the astonishing thing is that a significant number of young people really think that if a policeman's banging on your window and you saying you need to step out of the car, that if you ignore him, then he'll go away. Or what I really see more than that is bargaining. Why? Well, because I said so. Yeah, but why? I didn't do anything. Well, you were driving erratically. You were drunk, but you can't prove that. Well, that's why you need to step out of the car. Well, why would I? And it just says why? And if you listen to them and you take a transcript of it, you just take a written transcript of it and watch the dynamic of the language, you can see that you're arguing with a 5-year-old. That this 5-year-old is trying to lawyer you out of punishing him for eating the cookies, and Gen Z already believe that they have it tougher than previous generations. Well, they don't. And the reason the body cam footage is so interesting to me now is because I believe that this whole thing, like everything else in the world, is a bell curve. It's a distribution curve. And what I start to see now is the head of that snake is well along the timeline, and it's getting fatter and fatter as we start to climb that side of this bell curve. Start to climb that side of the bell curve, we're going to see more and more and more people coming into conflict with the law, which means reality. And we're going to see more and more people get away with breaking the law, like various high-level Democrats. And we're also going to see lawfare employed against innocent people, starting with the former president of the United States and working its way all the way down to anybody in a blue state who defends their home. Somebody smashing through the window, rummaging through their house, he shoots him. Turns out that the guy was not armed or whatever. That's your fault for not having, you didn't warn him. You didn't shoot the gun out of his hand. You didn't shoot him in the little toe like you should have. And so you go to jail and he gets a settlement. So it's going to be people who do not have any belief in or respect for the law, which is why I said right at the beginning that one of these episodes is going to be called Traitors, because law enforcement officials that are either overstepping their boundary because they're on an authority trip or who are in fact corrupt are traitors to the cause of lawfulness. They aid and abet the enemy enormously. They give them ammunition with which to use in this battle of narratives that the police are all brutal. And by the way, you'll be pleased to know that at least as far as I can tell, pretty much any time anybody gets arrested, and virtually every time a black person gets arrested, the first thing that comes out of their mouth as they're standing there with their hands behind them is, I can't breathe. Consistently. I've seen it 40 times. Consistently. I can't breathe. It's screaming at the top of your lungs, ma'am. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Okay. Okay. We know where it's going. We know where it came from. So my greatest concern is using the power of the state and the power of law against law-abiding people, where the law is being employed specifically against what the law was there to provide. There's supposed to be laws against murdering people, but when the laws are set up in such a way that the person who's stopping the person murdering somebody suffers punishment, and the person who was planning or doing the murdering either doesn't get punished or gets a reward, then that is what I worry about, because that's where the law-abiding people are going to have a real problem. And that is, what do you do when the laws are weaponized against you? This started, as far as I could see on the radar, this started with the IRS thing in, was it 2015 or earlier, where the IRS was denying 501c3 status to a number of conservative projects and just greenlighting the progressive ones, and they were called to Congress and show us the emails, and, well, the hard drive failed. Okay, ma'am, well, it's a network, so what about the backup? You're required to have a backup. Yeah, well, the backups failed too. Really? Okay, well, it's a 2,000 computer network, so let's get it off of any one of those machines. Well, they all failed too, and their backups failed too. And we let that go. You know, we just let that kind of brazen lying go. How many times have you seen footage in the last 2 years of genuine heroes, and there's only a few of them, Jim Jordan's one of them, and where they are grilling a Biden nominee, and the Biden nominee essentially says, I'll circle back to you on that, I'll get back to you on that later, Senator, or completely dodges the question. How many times have you seen that? I see it every day. They start asking questions about, did you tweet this? Well, you have to understand it. You have to take the social context into consideration, Senator. I mean, when you look back at this, no, I'm not asking about the history of the country. I'm just asking you, is this your tweet or not? Well, Senator, I'm trying to explain to you, if you look at the cultural history, it just goes on and on and on, and they keep doing it, and they get away with it because nobody goes to jail for contempt of Congress. So when the laws are not enforced on the highest level, then it's going to be up to us to it's going to be up to us to enforce the law and abide by the law at the same time. That's the challenge, I think. That's the challenge. If the law just disappeared, then the people would find a way to enforce the law. We see this all the time. It's the exact same thing that you see when you see these say no to oil people. They're blocking traffic, and what happens is the police will not come and move them out of the way. In a healthy society, any sane society, if these people are blocking traffic with their protests, it's not a protest anymore. They're holding those people hostages. People have died because ambulances couldn't get through. In a healthy society, the police come and arrest those people. But when the police don't come and arrest those people, and never do because of the political forces up at work, well, then what happens is people get out of their cars and start dragging these limp babies out to some place where they allow 4 or 5 cars to go through. People get out of their cars and start picking them up and moving them. And this kind of thing is wonderful and would happen all across the country if law disappeared. But my concern is that the law has been and will continue to be and will accelerate to be more and more weaponized against the law-abiding. Because ultimately, the thing I've learned about law in this country is it's no longer a question of guilt or innocence. It's a question of whether we decide to prosecute or not. That's what I've come to believe. On the highest levels and on some of the lowest levels. I've come to believe that it's not a question of, hey, person committed a crime, let's go looking for evidence. Now it's, let's go look for evidence because they must have done something. and then we will lock up those people, but we won't touch the people who are burning down cities or waving flags in the Capitol. When the Capitol Police say, well, you can go in if you want to, that's a little suspicious. So they needed insurrection so that they could crack the whip and have the Army and the Justice Department come down hard and make it clear to everybody who disagrees with this government that if you don't get in line, you go to jail. And they wanted that example out there. I don't think they got quite as much as they were hoping for. I'm convinced that the people, and I'm talking specifically about Nancy Pelosi among many others, knew that Trump supporters were really fired up, had a legitimate reason to be fired up. They could have produced ironclad evidence that there was no meddling in the election. They could have done that, or the Supreme Court could have ruled on it, but they punted too. So I think that Pelosi thought that if Trump brings this Patriot group to Washington on January 6th, I believe that they believed that there would be a lot of gunfire, that a lot of these American patriots would be bringing guns, and it turns out the only person that was actually shot was a former Air Force person who was a patriot and basically gave her life for the country because she was shot dead by a D.C. policeman who had no justification for it. And it's clear on the videotape that there's no justification for it. This is a prime example of how the lawless are going to use the law to keep the law-abiding in their place. So that's, I think, the primary challenge that we're going to face. One of the things I've learned from these body cam videos is, and this is going to sound strange because it was somebody in the Stratosphere Lounge group who said that it's pointless. This got me started thinking about the whole fourth turning thing. Said it's pointless to try to apply yesterday's solutions to today's problems. And I realized that's really true. So I started with a clean piece of paper in my head and started asking myself, what do I see evidence of, and what would the logical outcome of that be? We are all thinking that what we're going to be facing is armies of government troops kicking our doors down. That's not what I think is going to happen for reasons I've just explained. Our problem is going to be that there are two classes of people. There are the minority classes, all of them together, that have been convinced now that white people stole this country from them, that they built everything, and they're filled with rage, and they are shoplifting now. I've seen 5 of these, where a black woman will go into a Target and just start taking stuff. And when asked about it, she says it's reparations. And actually, when one of them was caught, went to the manager's office and said, this is $4,000 of merchandise that you're walking out of the store with. She just came out and said, yes, this is reparations for slavery. And I suppose she can just come back and do that anytime she wants to. That mentality, the mentality of these kids at McDonald's that I mentioned before, where they're, they have to arrest 8 of them because the policemen have told this group, this pack of feral children, that the manager of the McDonald's wants them off the property, and the abuse that they hurl at this policeman is beyond belief. The things they call him is unbelievable, and he's just trying to shepherd people out the door. He gives them 15 warnings. You have to get off the property or else you're going to be arrested. And he's just doing it. He's just herding these cats out the door. And finally, the guy who was the most vocal about it, who goes outside the building, goes around the corner, I think he's gone home, he gets back inside the restaurant and is now standing in line demanding his food. And at that point, the officer arrests him. And what I've come to realize is, it's a strange thing to say, but I'm watching these policemen be psychologists and therapists. They're in the videos I've seen, doing an extraordinary job of de-escalating things, calming things down, trying to explain to people who really don't deserve any explanation about this and that, and they've been pretty much uniformly spectacular. And I think that the one of the standing armies that we're going to need in the future is we're going to need a standing army of psychologists, behavioral specialists, psychiatrists that can prescribe medication where it's needed, because I don't think that those people that have been brainwashed can fully recover. I think if you're still calling your mom at 30 years old when you get in trouble, or 20, if that's your go-to response, I don't think those people will recover from that. I'm not saying that they're going to be criminals. I'm just saying they're not prepared for the world. And the great thing about the body cam footage, why I'm so, I don't want to say addicted to it, but where that's got my full interest, is because, like I said, this is the leading edge of where this generation is told to distrust anything in authority, distrust any kind of authority. All the police are murderers. Anybody who's in conflict with the police is automatically correct. That cohort is beginning to come into contact with things like driving cars. And when they are confronted with policemen, the thing that's most interesting about this is not that they're resisting, but it's their expectation that their resistance will be effective. That's what's the most amazing thing to me. They're simply saying, I'm talking about white liberal kids, and mostly young women who've got really, really, really angry. They're fouler mouthed than the young men are. They're more violent. They're more prone to abuse. This generation of young women is really, really messed up, and that's going to be a big problem. And we're going to have to treat, on some level, if you think about it, we're going to be facing, pick a number, 40 million, let's say, somewhere in that general ballpark, if I had to guess. We're going to be facing 40 million casualties. We're going to have a pandemic of lawlessness with 40 million people that are going to have to be treated. I think it's probably around that number. It may be less than that, but it's not less than 10 million. These are people who have been completely brainwashed to believe that something that is not true is true. And some of them will resist to the point where you can use violence against them legally, but most of them will simply just plain sabotage things and refuse to obey the law because the laws don't apply to them. Nothing applies to them. They've never been told no. They don't know how to handle it. 15 years ago, when I started doing this, I said, when they first began not keeping score at Little League ball games, I remember thinking, it's like, I played Little League for 2 years. My first year, we were 0-10. We didn't win a single game. That was stressful and painful, but I dealt with it when I was 11 and not when I'm 21. So, there you go. Sorry, there's a Bandit 848 with a super chat. Thank you, Bill. I'm in a situation today that this was the nugget of knowledge I needed to square the social circle. Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for the super chat. So that's where it's going to be. And our weapons are going to be. I got to be careful about this, not because of being misquoted, but I'm used to that. I don't want to be misunderstood about this. There's nothing more horrific in recent memory to free people than re-education camps, concentration camps, or death camps. And so when you talk about camps and things like that, that's not a word I want to use. But if you've got 30 million people who are, what do we have in prisons now, 2 million? If you've got 30 million people who are raised with lawlessness to varying degrees of violence, then you are going to need treatment centers. Facilities is probably the better word. Not to re-educate them or give them, electroshock therapy. Just someplace where those that can be rescued realize that, no, the law actually applies to everybody and you don't get your way all the time. I think most people would probably be cured by that. I'm very curious. See, and here's the thing. This is what I was mentioning earlier where our worst enemy is the law. Because I'll see these young kids get arrested for drunk driving, and I mean barely standing drunk off their ass drunk. They insult and abuse this officer to the limits of anybody's sanity. Like I said, when I saw this video of these 8 kids getting arrested at McDonald's, I said, if I'd been a police, the headline would be eight kids shot at McDonald's, and they just dealing with it and stuff. And they're saying, you can't arrest me, you can't touch me, I have a right, you don't have a right to arrest me. It turns out they're wrong about that. All of this. I want to know what percentage of those kids come out of the experience with having learned a lesson. But what you find at the end of virtually all of these videos is, I just watched this 20-year-old woman drive drunk, hit a tree, call the policeman every worst name in the world, resist getting out of the car, scream and yell when she was taken out of the car, get into the back of the seat and just banging her head against the door, screaming and yelling, and all the rest of this stuff. Law enforcement, battery on law enforcement officers, kicking them, biting them, all of this. And you watch all of it, they end up in jail, and then afterwards you find out so-and-so was charged with driving while intoxicated, resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and felony battery on a law enforcement officer. And the consequences were the case was dropped, charges were dropped, or paid a $200 fine. And to me, that's telling me they not only didn't learn the right lesson from this, they learned exactly the wrong lesson. They got what they believed reinforced, that they can do whatever they want to without consequences. So yeah, so they had a bad night, big deal. What did it cost them? Nothing. They got away with it. And you get what you pay for, you know. You get what you pay for. But that's the bad news. The good news is it's really hard to be terrified of guys in, you know, black boots, black jackets, black ski masks when you confront them and they curl up in a ball and start crying and asking for their moms. That's the upside to this mental instability. They have no moral toughness. However, the kids in the inner cities have a great deal of moral toughness, and the people coming across the border have a great deal of moral toughness. They're going to be a much tougher problem, I suspect. But I look at how these groups operate. I watch footage from inside of gangs that are taken on either by documentary crews or with other gang members. I look at the dynamics of how prosecutions go in terms of who's turning state's evidence and all the rest of this stuff. And I don't see any group out there that I consider to be a potential problem. I don't see any group out there that is even close to a match for the kind of citizens that I know in terms of actual armed combat. I mean, I've seen an awful lot of videos of them shooting pigs outside at nighttime using these thermal scopes. And these guys have gotten damn good at it, and none of these guys can run as fast as those little bastards do. I mean, just to put a cherry on the top of it, if you're talking about defending yourself against these kind of lawless, violent super criminals, I've seen guys hitting piglets this big, you know, with AK rounds, or not, never seen with an AK round, by the way, AR rounds at 200 yards at nighttime. So, you know, I'd rather be with the competent, law-abiding people that trust each other than the incredibly violent, emotionally fragile, emotionally battered people that cannot form alliances because they're constantly so paranoid and so worried about, you know, being knocked off. So that's what I think is about this whole thing's about. I'd like to be wrong. Actually, in this particular case, I'd actually like to be right about this, because if it turns out this is true, then this is something we'll get through. We've gotten through it before. We've gotten through much worse before. World War II was worse than what's going to happen, I think. And the Civil War was much worse than World War II in terms of impact on the country. And the previous cycle, we didn't have a country. So I think this one's going to be relatively, when I say relatively, I mean compared to World War II, it's going to be relatively bloodless, and the challenge isn't going to be a challenge of, do you have the guts to go ashore in the first wave on Iwo Jima? It's, do you have the patience to deal with grown children who will never grow up, do you are you going to be capable of dealing with this coming crisis? And as the theory predicts, which really got me thinking harder than anything, was the statement that they said that the generation that is growing up during the unraveling, they will be the heroes of the next crisis because it's unraveling to crisis, which means that the people who are going to be fighting this next conflict they're going to be Gen Z. That's where the heroes are going to come from. And I had a hard time with that for about 15, 20 seconds. And then all of a sudden I realized, no, that makes perfect sense. That's where the heroes are going to be. They're going to be Gen Z kids who are going to be using solutions that can't occur to me because I didn't grow up in their world. They're going to have strategies and solutions that not only do I not understand, but many of them will seem counterproductive or whatever. And this is where wise persons realize their own limitations and just sort of step back and just let the professionals do their job. But for all of these emotionally shattered children, there are Gen Zers out there that are still getting Eagle Scouts, and I see inventions that are coming from young American kids, not coming from anywhere else in the world. Virtually everybody at SpaceX is either a millennial or a Gen Z, and they're doing astonishing work. And when I hear the guys doing the mission control thing and they sound like children to me instead of like the steely-eyed missile men that I'm used to, that's a Bill problem. That's not a them problem. They're performing beautifully. That's just a case of me being old and cranky. I expect my guys to sound like mission controllers, and they don't. They sound like they're playing Fortnite or something. But anyway, that's where we're going to have to find them, and our job is going to be to ammo them up and to back them up in the same way that parents of the GI generation would send them letters from home and care packages, and Dad would, taught them how to shoot and hunt and survive out in the bushes, in the forest. It's all very complicated, but it's also very simple. I'm not going to get through all of these. How long are we? We're coming up on the 2-hour mark. I'll get through some more, but I'm not going to get through them all. Okay, so Joe Roth. I will keep my question short with minimum preamble. How is it possible Trump is only up ahead 8 points in Texas above Biden in the polls? Bush and Romney won Texas by a margin of 25 points, but Trump only won by 8 points each time in only one election cycle. I thought Texas was getting redder, not bluer. Also, you mentioned that Republicans are +6 above Democrats in political party identification, which is unheard of. Where did you hear this, and do you think it's accurate? Lastly, Charlie Kirk believes RFK Jr. is running as an independent means a guaranteed loss for Trump, as it would take more votes away from him than Biden, and issued a dire warning to us Trump supporters. I disagree with that point. What say you on all of these questions? Well, first of all, if somebody's going to break ranks in 2024, it's going to be the people who are most ashamed of their party. It's going to be the people who are going through the most angst about, okay, I support this stuff that I find disgusting and repulsive. Now, there are some Republicans and some conservatives like that, but I don't think that number is anything like, not even close to the number of people who have been lifelong Democrats and who are seeing all of this transgender stuff and my daughter's been on the swim team and now she's being, now she's coming in second with a 30-second lag behind a guy who decided he felt like a girl today, and I'm living in a suburb of Portland, and I don't get too much trouble, but I go into Portland and I see what used to be a beautiful city is now just a wasteland. I think, and by the way, Charlie, you put the name Kennedy on a ballot and you're going to attract Democrats to that by a factor of 10 to 1. So I think he's going to pull a lot more people from the Democrats than from Trump. That's what I think. We'll see. The people I know who are pro-Trump, and that's most of the people I know, are really pro-Trump. And they don't seem to be in any danger of shaking loose. And I don't know many garden variety Republicans who are at the point where they say, "Boy, this Donald Trump's tone and his bragging and his tweets really bother me so much, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden again." I don't see that at all. I do see a lot of people who have watched the world get a lot worse in the last 4 years. So I don't know. The number I saw, the +6 number, was from a polling company. I don't remember which one. I want to say it was CBS, but I'm not sure. And to say that Trump is up by 8 points in Texas at this point in the polls, I don't. I've seen so much manipulation of information that is much more concrete than a poll. Like, for instance, mortality rates. Those are real numbers. Those aren't opinions. Those are actual numbers. You can go in and count them. But I just don't believe. I don't believe it. Now, 2022 was a slap in the face and a genuine wake-up call. Things have gotten considerably worse than that. I don't see. I don't know. So as far as the margin goes, I don't know what the margin is. But I can't. And look, ultimately, Joe, it's a question of, even if that poll is correct, that assumes that the voting is legal and accurate, which I have a strong sense in Texas it will be. Although I pay particular attention to the voting districts in Austin. So at this point, a traditional solution, meaning a election change, to our coming crisis, I don't think it's going to prevent the crisis. I do think it would definitely enormously help soft land the crisis. You know, if you have Republicans in charge, you can start letting all of this stuff down easy. It's still going to come. You still got these broken kids. You got a broken generation. You got these incredibly violent, toxic cities. You've got a porous southern border. If Republicans manage to control all three branches of government, then all three branches of the two houses, the Senate, the House, and the presidency. If that happens, and by the way, actually I should have said yes, all three branches, because the Supreme Court is able to overturn elections if they feel like it, which was never, ever, ever part of the plan, but, you know, there you go. So I'm not saying I'm not concerned. I've been told by a number of pollsters that people go out not to vote who they're voting for, that people go out on election day to vote who they're voting against. And I can't think of a single Republican who voted for Trump in 2016 who will not vote for him in 2024. I haven't seen any of those. So I don't think Trump has lost any support since 16 or even 2020. I see a lot of people who are absolutely amazed and dismayed at Joe Biden. And when Trump gets into election season, when it starts for real, then all of a sudden we're going to see the real Joe Biden in advertisements. Trump is smart enough to put together ads that are just nothing but Biden walking around confused. Then another ad that's nothing but him smelling girls' hair. Then nothing but him choking on lines, and nothing but him, walking and doing that little trot of his and then falling down. He'll be brutal with it. We have opinions about Joe Biden because we see news sources that most Americans don't get to see. It's not that it's banned or anything. It's just that it's not promoted, so they don't even, they don't even know it's there. And of course, institutions, when they get corrupted, they usually get corrupted left. Fox News is a great example of that. Fox became so popular because it was a conservative outlet in a fundamentally conservative country that was an alternative to everything else. And over the last 8 years, at least, probably longer, I've watched them become more and more and more left-wing and less and less about stating what we're all about. It's hard to imagine why people would vote for you if you cannot articulate what it is that you represent and what you stand for. And this is a big problem that we've had enormous problem that we've had, and this is why guys like me are probably more important than I realize, because in a messaging war, it is essentially, really, it's your writers and your speakers that are your special forces guys. They're the ones that can really, really move the needle, make a difference. In this kind of conflict that I'm trying to sketch on the outlines of, a conflict of narratives and stories, it's going to be who can tell the best story. And I think our story's much better than their stories. And furthermore, I don't think they have storytellers. Just looking at what they did with Star Wars and Star Trek and all the rest of it, there's no talent there. They don't have any talent. We have, on the other hand, lots of talent. We just need to employ it better. And we do a miserable job of employing it, because we are still thinking in terms of the previous cycle. We're thinking that politicians should be delivering the message, because prior to this cycle, the only people that could get any loudspeaker time were politicians. If you were just a guy with an opinion, you had no way of getting that opinion out to the rest of the country in the 1940s. Just didn't. Now, freelance narrative mechanics will be the people providing the weapons in this mimetic war. And if it comes down to that actual storytelling thing, I'm the best there is. That I'm usually not nearly so boastful, but that is just the truth. I've seen everybody out there, and I've seen Glenn Beck come real close, but when I'm on my game, I've never seen anybody do what I can do. I don't think I've ever spoken like that on this show before, ever, but that's the reality of it. When I'm really on my game, it's great. Now, this is the whole part of the trying to look forward instead of back thing. When I'm really on my game, I'm the most effective speaker I've ever seen in terms of speaking to boomers, younger members of the greatest generation, and maybe early millennials. But that doesn't mean I'm the best person speaking to young people. So what I have to do, and what all of us have to do, is we have to understand that we need to realize that the message that works among conservatives, and the message that would have worked 20 or 30 years, is no longer it, which is essentially why, whether subconsciously or not, I've just, I turned down a chance to work for Daily Wire many years ago. I do work for them freelance. By the way, Empire of Terror, I just finished the last set of notes on episode 8. I've still got some episodes to see as a result of the notes, but it's astonishingly good. And that's just due to the production team. It's just really, 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 really good. If you could get that in front of people, you'd sway a certain age group of people, but there's some people that just plain won't watch it because it's 8 hours long. And the thing that I'm most concerned about with young people is not their lack of knowledge. That's curable. It's their lack of curiosity. That's what scares me among the Gen Z that we see, the ones making all the noise. They don't seem to care that they're badly educated. And this is all part of this new form of messaging, kind of thing that I have to recalibrate my thinking for, because I want to go after the fact that they're not educated and terribly educated. And I realize now, no, that's not what you should be doing. You need to be going after the people that left them that badly educated. That's where the attack needs to be, not on Gen Z, because it's legitimate. It's not just a tactic. It's true. Gen Z didn't ask for the education they got, and Gen Z didn't ask to be raised the way they were. They just were. So if you want to reach these people and bring them back into the daylight, you got to realize that going after them is not going to help. You got to go after the people that made them, that hobbled them. That's a good word, actually. You got to go after the people that hobbled them and get them to realize that there's an entire world out there that they have been intentionally locked out of, because if you step out into that world, then you are no longer pliable, reliable tool for the forces that are in control. And the forces that are in control are telling you that that we're the bad guys. We're not the bad guys. We gotta get that door open and get these kids out in the daylight. Figuratively and literally, we got to get them out into daylight. This is the first generation in human history, Gen Z, that has been, in my opinion, in my perception, I know for a fact it's the first generation in human history that is the first generation ever to be raised indoors exclusively. Ever. Just think about that for a minute. We're dealing with for the first time, a generation that has no contact with the outside world. None. And of all the things I've mentioned in the body cam footage, calling mom and crying and bargaining and everything, I will tell you what the one universal bleat is out of these sheeps when they're coming into contact with reality. Anybody want to guess what the one universal thing is among all of these traffic stops with Gen Zers? The crying and the bargaining and the insulting and the bro and this. What's the one consistent thing that is in every one of these things? I'm going to just pause to see what the sharp typists have figured it out yet. And owned a mobile phone from age 2. They all want their phones. That's the one thing they have in common. Absolutely in common is they want their phones. They are being pulled out of cars by policemen and they're talking to their moms on the phone. The second that they're arrested, they say, "Bring me my phone." Well, no, we're not going to I have a constitutional right to make a phone call. Well, you have a right to make a phone call to an attorney or whatever from the jail. You probably can make as many phone calls as you want to, but you're not getting it in the car now. You're violating my rights. Well, turns out you're not. I want my phone. And they go nuts. They go nuts without their phones. Nuts. Which is why, if I was going to bring these people back into some sense of reality, I would do what that afterburner I did called 3.5 days, which I thought was really, really, really wonderful. Just take them all, take everybody, myself included, take 1% of the year, that's 3.5 days, and put them out in a cabin, and groups of 20 or whatever, and say, okay, here's food for 1 day. You're going to be here for 3.5 days. Do what you want. If you want to sit around and not do anything, you're going to be hungry. If you don't want to go down all the way down to the stream and bring it back with a bucket, then you're going to be thirsty. And if you don't want to go to the trouble of boiling it before you drink it, then you're going to get sick. And it's up to you. You do what you want to. I'm really worried about young women. I'm very, very worried about them because they are, unlike the young men, they have been conditioned into, modern feminism and progressivism has conditioned young women to be in direct violation of their biology. I mean, you listen to the more outspoken ones, and you hear them when they talk about kids, they use words like parasites. How dare you say I cannot remove this parasite from inside my body? That's how they talk. This is deeply concerning to me because young men have always been kind of dicks about these things. That's how it goes. So there's no brakes on young men's behavior. Used to be that, and forget your mom or your dad. Used to be that you would generally be held in place by a young woman who had a strong moral sense and who could correct you when you were starting to go across the line, and who was perfectly happy to watch you go up to that line because it's nice to be defended and taken care of. So all of this stuff is just great. That's a great point there. Blue Planet says young women have accepted marrying the state instead of a man. Yes, accept. No question. 100% in agreement. However, the coda to this is, And that has worked for 10 years or 20, but they are beginning to find out that the state is not spooning with you at nighttime in the winter. That the state is providing all the things that a husband used to provide. It's providing, they think, security and income and all the rest of it, but it's not keeping them warm at night. And this is beginning to dawn on them, and they're starting to wake up, and they're not happy about it. Steve beat me to the punch, actually, by just weird coincidence. What I was about to say is, I will tell you this: the next 20 years are going to be very, very good years for cats. That's basically it. They're going to be. If I was giving financial advice, and I'm not, but if I was, I would say at this point in time, invest heavily in pet supplies, specifically cat supplies. That is a market that is going to continue to go up as more and more young women find themselves unable to marry a guy who doesn't want to sleep with them because they've slept with, well, not that they want to sleep with them, don't want to marry these girls who have 100 partners at age 22. They need companionship, and cats are the way it's going to go. Used to be dogs in some cases. Dogs can protect women, but the problem with dogs is if you have a dog, you have to go outside, and nobody wants to go outside, so there you go. I genuinely think that I will live to see and perhaps even live to be a part of, what is the word I want to use here? Because there's so many terms like re-education and stuff that's just so fraught with so much horrible baggage. Let's just call them experience camps. I really want to see what happens if you take Gen Zers on a bus to the Grand Canyon. It's an 8-hour drive. You've got rides for them all on the rapids, in the rafts, and they are not allowed to bring their phones. Restoration facilities, yeah. I'd really like to know what happened. The first eight hours would be extraordinarily traumatic because they've never been bored before. That's a thing that people my age all experienced, and to some degree, millennials as well. But Gen Z's never been bored, ever, because this thing has always got something to say, and it's always got, where did it go? It's always got somebody to talk to. I haven't been bored since I've owned one of these. Never. I've never had a moment of boredom since I've had one of these. If I'm sitting in the DMV or something, I'll do crossword puzzles or I'll check the mail, I'll do whatever. But if you take away their phones for 3.5 days and forget about putting them in the woods and surviving and stuff, I'm very curious to know what will happen when you take Gen Zers away from their technology and just show them the outside world. I want to see what happens when a member of Gen Z gets a sunburn. That's what I want to see. I want to see what they do when the world could be ending before your very eyes. And a nicer version of that is you could be going down the Grand Canyon seeing something absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful, and they will experience it like this. This is how they will experience it. They won't see the Grand Canyon. They won't experience the Grand Canyon. They're going to see what's on the screen here. That's why I wouldn't let them have it. I'd just take it away. And basically force them to experience the complexity and the reality and the beauty of the real world. I think if you did that, you would certainly convert a significant number of them. A significant number of them. If I could take them anywhere in the world, if I could do a restoration trip anywhere in the world, phones off, it would be without doubt Sequoia National Park, without doubt. There's not even a second place in this. Well, Grand Canyon. I would take them to Sequoia National Park because there are some of those areas there that are so overwhelming that they blank out rational thought. You don't think about your taxes when you're in the middle of that grove of whatever 13 massive sequoias are, and it's clean, fresh air. You're in the mountains. You can feel it. actual feel oxygen, smells good, and I had seen pictures of sequoias. I'd seen pictures of people standing next to sequoias. I'd seen people driving cars through sequoias. I had heard that they're really, really big trees. So many years ago, I went up there with my mom, and when we saw the first one, because we see a lot of California redwoods on the way up, and those are big, tall trees. But when we saw the first sequoia, I just stopped the car. We just got out, and it wasn't a particularly large one. It just beggared belief. You just couldn't believe it. So that's what I would do. I wouldn't rub their noses in anything. I used to want to, and I suppose sometimes I still do, but that's not going to help anything. I think we could take them out there and show them some really beautiful things. And also, not only would it open up their eyes and get them off the phones, it would also go a long, 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 long way to dispelling this idea that the earth is about to die. If you go out whale watching in Santa Barbara, Natasha and I went, I want to say 3-4 years ago, that water is crystal clear. There's not the slightest sheen of oil anywhere. Once you get out, just sort of out of the bay, the common dolphins, they're not bottlenose dolphins, they're common dolphins, smaller with a kind of beautiful striping. They are attracted to the engine sound of that boat, and they come to you. They come to you and show off, 200 of them, and you're just sitting there looking at this beautiful water, and all of a sudden, and the next thing you know, you're in the middle of 200 dolphins that have swum to you because they really dig interacting with us the same way we dig interacting with ideas together. I think one of the reasons that younger people are so sure the earth is dying is because they have no experience dealing with what the earth is actually doing. They just don't go outside. Period. You know? It says on my phone the planet's dying. Here's a mound of garbage and so on, so I guess that must be true. If you were outside, you would see that the planet is healthier than it has been since the Industrial Revolution, without question. Without question. This is the cleanest, healthiest the planet has been since 1790s, 1800, something like that. And they should have that experience, not for political purposes, not for anything larger than they're human beings, and they should have that experience. And they are addicted to a device that is an extremely addictive device. I lose a lot of sleep to this thing. A lot of sleep. I'm constantly looking at this thing, and it's a real problem for me. And so I fully understand why young people are, in this. I haven't had a chance to do much of it lately, but I've talked about DCS, this combat flight simulator, and it just gets better and better. And Microsoft Flight Sim 2022 or 2024. It's virtually indistinguishable from reality. And I realize now that if that had been available when I was 14, 15 years old, I would never, ever, ever leave the house. There's nothing outside that could have matched that, except for everything, It's so powerful that it's not that breaking that link, or at least loosening it, can't be voluntary. I don't want to use coercion exactly, but you these people will not put the phones down. They've never been without them, and when they are arrested, the first thing they say, "I want my phone. I want my phone. I want my phone." Well, we've got your phone, and it's in your purse, and it's in the front seat, and you can use your phone, and you get to jail. I want my phone now. You have no right to take my phone. It's against the law to take my phone. You've got my private property, blah, blah, blah. All these things they've heard from all these people, and they go off losing it. But, yeah, this business of watching life like this, fireworks displays like this, watching, some kind of disaster like this, and you're not looking at the disaster, you're looking here. So you might as well not even be there, because you're looking at it on a screen that you could look at it from on the other side of the planet. And I'm also curious to know that's a great point, Regulus. I'll get to that in a second. I'm also curious to know what the relationship and is a very, very strong relationship. I'm very curious to know what the relationship is between boredom and imagination. And if you eliminate boredom, then I think you essentially eliminate imagination. That's what I think is happening to these kids. I think that looking back on myself, the development of my imagination, which I say is pretty well advanced, is something that I did when I was bored. I didn't have entertainment. I was on a road trip, so I started thinking about things. And if you take away the boredom, you take away the need for imagination. It sounds like such an old hackneyed thing. It really does. But there's some truth to it. You could take a ballpoint pen and a ruler and stick the ruler in the clip and you had an airplane. Now, I'm not saying that is superior to the DCS experience by any means. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, since we didn't have DCS, we could make that transition. We could believe it. We could make ourselves believe it through the power of our imaginations. I used to go down the street with the F4 Phantom. My friend Steve Stipp and I, in our probably the single nerdliest half hour of my life, we both built 1/72nd scale F4 Phantoms. And it was getting late in the day. Steve's an incredibly talented artist, so he put a paint scheme on that consisted, I want to say, of, I think it might have been like purple, with blue flames coming off the leading edges for me and green flames coming off the leading edges for him. So we called them the Firebirds and whatever. And then we stepped out into the street and we started doing air show maneuvers holding these little jets like this. And we must have looked really ridiculous, but it was so much fun. I remember just the kind of euphoric feeling. I don't know how many other people have done this. I suspect quite a few. Kind of euphoric feeling of holding an airplane model out the window in a car while you're moving, just feeling the air on that thing. And if you pitch the nose up, you could actually feel it go up. That's texture. And if you don't go outside, think about what these kids are not just missing an experience. They're missing entire senses. Their sense of smell is essentially out of the picture. Their sense of touch is out of the picture. That alone will drive a macaque insane. Their sight and their sound are limited to pretty small little things, and I think on some level it's probably best to think of them as sensory deprived. Almost on some level like they were raised by feral wolves or out in some shack someplace by some psychopath who throws a supply of white bread on the floor and peanut butter, and they've been out in this lunatic frickin' woodshed for 17 years. Steve Whoop says not deprived but oversaturated. That's an interesting question. That's an interesting point, rather. Yeah, so instead of having a wide range of experiences, their experiences are very, very small. So they have to be very intense, turned up to 11. Contrast and saturation up way high. There was one thing I wanted to deal with here. Let me see. I remember seeing something I thought was really good. I can't figure out what it was now, unfortunately. Hang on a second. Because I do remember thinking, it really needs... Oh, it might have been the boredom thing. Well. Okay. In any event. Oh, it was Regulus. Hang on a second. Scroll up my Regulus here in a cage. That's it. There it is. Thank you. I think we'll probably end with this. So, this is a real question. This is not a rhetorical question. This is an actual question. I actually think about this. The original Star Trek pilot was called The Cage, and it starred Jeffrey Hunter instead of William Shatner as Captain Christopher Pike. Spock was real emotional. He was shouting everywhere. The first officer was Major Barrett, who became Major Roddenberry, and Roddenberry pitched this science fiction show to NBC, and they bought the pilot. and then they got the pilot and they did something that I'm not aware has ever happened before. I certainly can't think of another example ever. They liked it just enough. There's a lot they didn't like. There wasn't enough action. There wasn't enough movement. There wasn't enough Western. Gene said Star Trek is the wagon train to the stars. None of that. The Cage is a very cerebral story. It's very, very clever, and it's very internal. And I think for the first and only time in history, I can't think of another case. The network ordered a second pilot. They said, we like it enough to be willing to spend money on a second pilot, but we're not going to buy what you just gave us. So the second thing was Where No Man Has Gone Before, which has got Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise rolling and ducking and punching and shooting his Winchester laser phaser rifle, and it was a lot more action oriented. They said, okay, we'll take that. But The Cage is touching on some very, very deep issues. And the fundamental idea about The Cage is they're essentially zookeepers who have the ability to control your mind. So even though you're being kept in a small cage with a plexiglass front, you don't see that. You think you're out in the woods on a beautiful summer day, and it's indistinguishable from reality. And if you don't like it being there, then suddenly you just wish you're somewhere else, and now you're on a tropical island. And it's indistinguishable from reality. And so the question then becomes, a serious question is, okay, so what's wrong with that? Because it feels repulsive, and certainly Roddenberry thought so, because that's why they had to destroy it, or at least quarantine it. So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with living a virtual experience? I think the answer I'm going to give is probably not one that you would think about, because you tend to think of, okay, that's when South Park did that episode on them playing, what was it, Final Fantasy, the one where they're all playing that online video game, and the video gamer, and they all get real fat, the four kids, and they get acne and stuff because they just sit inside all day. So there's that, but I think the problem is, if you lived in a virtual world, you'd get everything you want all the time instantly, and that is a form of hell. Because, and Gen Z is largely experiencing this. Mom, bedpan, exactly, George. So, what's the problem with getting everything you want all the time? Well, there's a bunch of problems with that, but the biggest one in my mind is you don't ever feel a sense of reward because you haven't been deprived of anything. You haven't had to work for it. You just ask for it, and there it is. Where does that train end? It never ends. All you can do in a world like that is to continue to increase the stimulus as you become more and more desensitized, and we're seeing that everywhere. So what is the actual problem with that? And I think that the main problem with that is, goes back to a conversation I had with our theater professor, Dr. David Shelton, who died not too long ago. He's the only guy in the whole department who really knew what he was talking about. He was really, and he'd go out drinking with us every night, and he picked up the tab. I bet he picked up $200,000 worth of students putting down $4 for a $7 dinner. But there was a situation where one of these movies had come out. It was a long way from virtual reality, but basically it was almost an experimental thing, but it was like a feature film, and they shot a number of different pathways, and that the film would stop at 5 or 6 points, and then everybody in the theater had like a box with a button, and they'd say, do you want this guy to go this way with this girl, or do you want him to go down the street with this? And the people would vote. And David Shelton said, that's the end of writers. And I said, I beg to differ with you. I can see artificial actors, but I don't see artificial writers. I certainly don't see it like that. And the reason that I'm talking about this now is because I think if you live in the virtual world, here's what you miss. I said to David Shelton, I said, look, Doc, a good writer makes you care about a character, and he makes you care about a character who he loves because he's willing to get him dirty. He's willing to have him fail. He's willing to have him have deep personal psychological issues, whatever, that need to be overcome. He does bad things. He has setbacks. If he doesn't have setbacks, he doesn't have any win. If everything is just an instant win, I didn't have the word Mary Sue back then, but that's why Mary Sues are just so damn boring. What is interesting about oh, come on. Goes to show the impression she made on me. I've already forgotten the name of Daisy Ridley's character. I honestly can't remember it. Ray, thank you. So what happens with Ray? You know, why would you be interested in Ray? Ray can do anything she wants to all the time. She never loses. She never has the X-wing kind of come out of the swamp and then sink back in. She doesn't have any setbacks. Everything's magical for her. Everything's fine. That's why nobody gives a damn about her, because she hasn't had to suffer. She hasn't had any reason for us to identify with her. She does everything perfectly. And I think if you lived in a virtual world, that's what would have happened. Would happen. You would always choose the path that was the most pleasurable. And because of that, you would have very little actual pain and very little desire and frustration and weight and all of those things. And since all of those things are annoying, you go through them, and the more you go through them, the more valuable the thing that you're going through the pain, frustration, and weight for becomes. You're paying for it in advance in terms of desire, basically. And that is where the real world beats the living hell out of the virtual world, because the real world will make you work for it. And there's no guarantee you'll get it either, but it'll make you work for it. The virtual world will provide it on demand. And it may delay you somewhat, and I'm talking about the idea of leveling up there. That's basically about it. Okay, so you can't get to this. You have to go through all these steps first. Okay, great. So I have to just go do a bunch of, just grinding or whatever it takes. But it's not a real reward, because it's essentially a chance to get a higher level in a video game, but you've already got the video game, so that it's not really the same thing. So. Yeah, we got a bunch of real issues coming up. There's never been a generation in human history that's been raised this way, ever, or even close. We don't have the comfort and the advantage of being some of the rare humans who are willing to look back and see what they did last time they were in the exact same situation. We don't have that. We know that we're going to avoid the next crisis is not going to be an invasion of America, because the last crisis, it was a potential threat, and we decided that's not going to happen again, and so it won't, at least not for this coming cycle. It will be completely different, and we're going to be dealing with what will eventually become the working population of the U.S., and then eventually the political party governing population of the U.S., who have been given everything all the time, expect that to continue, and therefore have a completely unrealistic worldview about pretty much everything. And I'll wrap with this. I think in there we're talking about the edit. I'm wondering if you're talking about Lucas with the edit. Anyway, I'm assuming it's the Han shot first thing, so I'll just close with that, because that's actually kind of important. And if you're not talking about that, then too bad. So here's where this pathology starts. By the way, I did have a thought that's kind of interesting, and this will be interesting for people of approximately my age. I was talking about calling the Frank Luke story the streak, because he just fought very fast, and he was like a meteor across history, and also he ran up a win streak that no one has ever matched and likely ever will match. And then a number of people in the comment section said, well, you can't call it the streak because of that song. They call him the streak. Look at that. Look at him. And I couldn't get that song out of my head. It didn't change my opinion about the title of the movie, but it did make me realize something. If you're old enough, if you're approximately my age, and I'm 64, you will remember a time in the 70s where streaking suddenly just exploded. Streaking was where people would get naked in a public place, a large group of people. It couldn't just be one person. And streaking is where, you just take an example. You'd have a football game, and some guy would run on the field naked, and he'd just run around naked until he was tackled, and people would kind of cheer. I remember cheering, and because it was, yeah, oh, that's cool. The guy had a lot of guts, and blah, blah, blah. He's a rebel. It's entertaining, is what it was. But I look back on that, and I realized that streaking phenomenon was like the super, super, super bleeding edge tip of the spear of lawlessness being tolerated, because it was so essentially harmless, but at the same time it was a violation of social norms, and it kept going because people looked at it as kind of freedom, kind of almost like a desire to be as brave as these streakers were. And that's the first thing I can remember in my life about lawlessness becoming not only okay but celebrated, was streakers, because they were. And I don't think streaking did any particular harm as far as streaking goes, but the idea that you can start doing things like running naked around in a football stadium will eventually lead to the idea that you can just start taking a crap on the middle of a road in the middle of Beverly Hills. It's pretty much the same thing. So anyway, there's that. So coming back to the Han thing. So when Star Wars was made, George Lucas was a young man. Steven Spielberg was a young man making roughly the same time Raiders of the Lost Ark and these great movies. And then over time, I think it was E.T. first, as they went from being young men to older men to being grandfathers, they went back and looked at their earlier work and said, we are contributing to the culture of violence by having Indiana Jones shoot that guy with a sword, or by having the agents coming for E.T. having guns in their hands. And the classic example is that George Lucas instinctively wrote, I've often wondered how much of Star Wars really is George Lucas, but in any event, wrote a scene that everybody connected to, that made us instantly love that character, and decided that moment was now retroactively toxic, and so he changed it. For those of you who are not familiar with this controversy, it's very simple. The first time we meet Han Solo is in the cantina, and he makes the deal with Obi-Wan, and Luke says he can get a better deal, and so basically Han says, I'm going to go get the ship ready. Chewie, go get the ship ready, and just as he's walking out the door, he's met by one of the worst aliens. The alien who played Greedo, the rubber face thing, was pretty much on the same level as the Gorn. But in any event, he runs into a reptilian amphibian type of creature who's got a blaster leveled at him, and he's a bounty hunter, and he's going to take Luke to Jabba the Hutt, who's going to either torture him and then kill him, or imprison him forever. Something bad is going to happen, and apparently Jabba has a legitimate concern here. So there's a scene inside a little booth in the cantina where Jabba's got a gun on him the whole time, and Han just does it. Come on, goes back, and as he reaches down, he undoes his strap on his pistol, and then basically this thing escalates verbally, and then finally comes to the effect of Jabba would like to kill you, and Greedo says something like, I'm looking forward to that, and Luke says, yeah, I bet you are. And then he fires this pistol, his blaster pistol, from under the table, blows a hole the size of a pizza inside of Greedo. He goes forward. Everybody's looking. Han says, sorry about the mess, throw some coins on the table, and everything goes back to normal again, because this is a violent place. Well, Lucas came to the idea. Did I say Jabba? I meant to say Greedo. Lucas, as he got older and more senile and less vigorous, decided that this was sending the wrong message to kids. That having Han shooting first made him a murderer. And so he re-edited that sequence, did it a couple times, and added special effects. And basically, what happens in the latest version of Star Wars, no doubt they'll change it again, is that Greedo fires a split second before before Han does. Not enough time for Han to respond. Not enough time for Han to get his pistol out. He just shoots, and then, and this professional bounty hunter Greedo misses Han from 2 feet away, hits the wall over his shoulder, and Han's reaction is so fast, there's no way that he couldn't have been in motion anyway. So this whole idea about him reacting to Greedo is just plain ridiculous. But that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, when you saw that in the movie theater, and I did see it in a movie theater. First time I saw Star Wars was in a drive-in movie theater. But when I saw that movie in a movie theater, and Han did that, it got a cheer. It's got the exact same cheer that Harrison Ford would get a couple of years later when he shoots the guy with a sword. It's like, yes, got it. I understand it. And the reason that people cheered, the reason that nobody ever thought that Han Solo was a murderer, you dumbass, is because they understood that he had a gun pointed at him the entire time. It was self-defense. It's him or me. It's not like Greedo was sitting in a corner and Han walked over to him and blew his frickin' head off. He has now got a gun on him, and this guy is telling him, he's just basically just wallowing in, in the victory. He said, "Oh, I'm going to enjoy watching you die. Essentially, I've got a gun on you. Let's go. Come with me and get killed." And then he Steve Whoop said he effed around and he found out. That's exactly what Greedo did. He effed around and found out. But this was crystal clear to anybody who saw the original cut. You didn't have to analyze it like I just did. He had a gun on him, and he outsmarted this reptile thing, and everybody was loving it. So even the justification for why they go back and rewrite history is not a justifiable justification. But my point is that if you saw Han Solo fire first, that affects the way you look at life. You realize from that lesson, that story that you've just seen, that becomes like a religion for an entire generation. You realize that this is a dangerous world, this Star Wars world, and that it is a world of lightsabers and blasters and ships that are shooting at each other, and it's not like our perfect suburban homes and everything. It is a dangerous world. It's the Old West, and you'd better have your 6-shooter at your side. You better be prepared to use it, and you don't draw on anybody unless you mean to fire. That kind of thing. That's the lesson that we all got from that. But when you take that away from a movie, then the kids don't get the lesson as a movie. They get the lesson as reality. When they go through these hysterics, and I mean genuine hysterics, when they get pulled over for a traffic ticket, it's because they have not had to deal with frustration and being told no and failure when they were playing a stupid Little League game. They never learned how to fail. They never learned how to obey anything. They never learned that there are forces more powerful than you. They never learned it as children. And the rationale was, if we don't expose them to unpleasant things, then they'll grow up to be much better people. Well, it turns out that's absolutely wrong. The more they protected this generation, the more emotionally damaged they became. The more they tried to protect them from negative emotions, the more negative emotions they suffered, because they never ever had a chance to say, okay, this stings, but it doesn't sting as bad as having my arm cut off, and it doesn't sting as bad as losing my house. I lost a baseball game, and it wasn't fun, and those guys are cheering, and we're sitting here moping, and we didn't lose. We lost every game this season. We played all year, and we didn't win anything. Never got a sense of victory. We did because of our coach, Mr. Kirkwood, who took us down and buy us Slurpees, whether we won or lost, told us we did a good job. But if you don't suffer the little traumas, then how are you expected to deal with the big traumas? If you don't understand the lesson of self-defense by watching it in a movie, then how are you ever going to learn it in real life? And what's going to be the effect on you in real life? These people are narcissists. It's ultimately what progressivism is. It's narcissism. It's them saying, I have the godlike power to make sure that my children never experience anything unpleasant, and I'm going to protect them even after I die. we're not going to teach him how to swim because that can be traumatic, learning how to swim. So we're going to just make sure that every single body of water is going to have a 18-foot high fence with security cameras and lifeguards on duty around any body of water, not just the ocean or pools, ponds, anything could happen. We're just going to cover it up with rubber things in case they fall. We're going to do all this other stuff. And then you end up with people who have no resiliency. It's the exact same thing like an immune system. You know, if you don't expose immune system of a child to pathogens, then the immune system doesn't know what a pathogen is, which is why farm kids don't get allergies ever, and why kids who are living in these disinfected, white countertops in skyscrapers in New York can't be around peanuts or any other thing without their faces, exploding. They just never got their immune system never got an education, and neither did their emotional system or their emotional structure. Never had to deal with little pain, little crisis. So when anything happens to them, it now becomes absolutely catastrophic. It's no longer, I got a traffic ticket. Now it's like, I've got to get out of here. Don't touch me, kicking and screaming, and you put handcuffs on me, and it's just a full-on meltdown, complete meltdown. This is the kind of thing they should have been experiencing when they were 3, having that meltdown on the floor of the Walmart because they didn't get the toy they want, but they did get the toy they want, so it worked. I know what I would have gotten if that happened to me, and that's why I'm not as nuts as they are. But it's not their fault. They didn't do it to themselves. They were the product of narcissistic parents, and who labored under what you could probably say is well-intentioned, faulty premise that you can protect people from, not only that you can protect people from bad things happening, but that it's good to do that. It's not good to do that. I'll just close with the example I use every time I talk about this. There was a school lockdown several years ago, probably close to 10 years ago now, because some kid had brought a Pop-Tart to school and he chewed it into the basic shape of a 45, He just ate this little corner out, so it looked approximately like a 45 automatic, semi-automatic. And when the so-called adults and authorities saw that this kid had chewed a piece of his Pop-Tart to make it resemble a gun, they locked the school down. And I think they called in SWAT teams. I wouldn't be surprised if helicopters arrived. And everybody evacuated the school. And everybody had a full-on, I'm being eaten by a leopard, fight or flight, maximum emotional reaction to this Pop-Tart. Now, I happen to know guys who are or were active SEAL team members, and they tell me just enough about what they do for me to realize that twice a night for 10 years, these guys jumped out of airplanes into hostile territory with night vision goggles, kicked down doors, and shot anybody that was in their way in order to get some high value assets people out of there, because we had a few questions we wanted to ask them. And I see these guys, and I know a significant number of Special Forces guys, at least very superficially. What I find from the combat veterans that I meet is that they don't have hysterics over a Pop-Tart that's chewed in the shape of a pistol, because they've had people with real pistols shooting real bullets at them, and that's where they calibrate their top-end responses. This guy, who I know well, is a SEAL team member, one of the people we're going to interview for Story Mechanics, by the way, is the most soft-spoken, polite, gentle guy, and nothing bothers him, because why should it? He goes out twice a night and gets shot at by people who are trying to kill him, and that's where his threat level is calibrated. I deeply admire him, and I tell myself I'm at least closer to that end of the spectrum than the Pop-Tart end when I think about how I handled single engine failures in a single engine airplane. I handled those well. I felt that initial panic, and then I just said, you can't panic or you're going to die, so what are you going to do? That makes me happy, or at least less ashamed. Anyway, that's it. All right, there are more questions that I'm not going to get to. I'm sorry, but I'm just about done. So we're 2 hours and a half. Typical show, I guess, something like that. A lot of things in motion at the same time, again, which is why nothing seems to be moving very fast. I'm concentrating exclusively on this website, getting this thing up now, and I'm actually said don't forget Metropolis. Metropolis, I think I pretty much covered. It's a I want to use Metropolis as a motif for industrial era imagery to deal with an information era issue. So that'll do it. Anyway, this show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who have kept us going for a long time, and by the people who made donations, one-time donations 2-3 weeks ago. Saved the entire ship here, and we've got a brand new website with a lot of new shows. John Voight said he's coming back at the end of November. It's pretty much the end of October. Pretty much the end of October. So I expect to start seeing some new stuff out there, and I'm actually really fired up, and I'm fired up because of the support we got, and because the website just looks so enticing. It looks like, yeah, this is worth money. This is actually value. So that'll do it. So I think this time we will say goodnight to our Twitch stream first. So thanks again for joining us. The show's made possible, like I said, by our members. They're great people. If you want to become one, you are more than welcome to do so. And if not, that's fine too. We'll see you next week right here on the Stratosphere Lounge. Now that we've got those idiots out of the way, I'll keep the stream going so people can get their last comments in and crying. Okay, YouTube, time to say goodnight. Thanks for being here. Had a large audience there for a while, relatively large anyway. So always great to see the tremendous support and the kindness and the terrific questions and all the terrific information that comes. So we're very grateful for that. So that'll do it for us, YouTube, and we'll see you probably Monday night for the Stratosphere Studio. That's not what I wanted.